I knew the moment I walked into that mansion that I did not belong there. The lights were too bright, the marble floors too shiny, the guests too powerful. My hands shook around the tray of champagne glasses as I followed the other servers into the ballroom. I kept reminding myself why I was here. My grandmother's medical bills were climbing fast, and this catering job paid more in one night than a whole week at the diner. A server beside me whispered so close to my ear that I felt her breath. One wrong word to these people, and you disappear forever. I looked at her in panic. She gave a tight nod toward the guests, every one of them dressed in the kind of clothes you only see in movies about dangerous men. This was not just a party. This was a gathering of Brooklyn's criminal elite, and I was the 20-year-old waitress who had no clue how I ended up involved with any of it. Mr. Giordano, our catering manager, had warned me 100 times while pacing nervously across the kitchen. Serve drinks, stay quiet, and never look a cavaliere in the eyes. They don't like attention from staff. They like to pretend we're not even there. So I kept my eyes down. I moved through the ballroom carefully, praying I wouldn't drop a glass or bump into anyone important. But everything changed when the room shifted into silence. Conversations stopped. People stepped back. A wave of fear moved through the crowd so strong I felt it in my bones. The Cavaliere patriarch had arrived. He walked into the room with a cane topped with a silver lion's head. His presence alone made the air tighten. People bowed their heads. Some even stepped aside like he was royalty. And then, for reasons I still do not understand, his eyes locked on me. My heart jumped into my throat as he walked straight toward me. My tray wobbled. I tried to lower my head, pretend I didn't notice, anything to avoid trouble, but he spoke to me sharply in a fast Sicilian dialect that I hadn't heard since my grandmother used it in our kitchen years ago. Without thinking, I answered him in the same dialect, my voice soft and respectful, my knees shaking as I added a small curtsy the way my grandmother taught me when I was little. The entire ballroom froze. Dozens of people stared at me like I had just confessed to a crime. My own breath stalled. I realized too late what I had done. Speaking their dialect meant I understood their private language, their secrets, their conversations. I had just put a target on my own back. Mr. Giordano rushed over, pale as a ghost, grabbing my arm. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cavaliere. She's new. She doesn't understand." He tried pulling me away, but the old man lifted a hand and stopped him with a single gesture. He studied me closely, his eyes sharp enough to pierce through skin. "Where did you learn the old dialect, child?" His voice was calm but heavy with suspicion and curiosity. Before I could answer, another presence appeared beside him. Ethan Cavaliere, the most feared young Mafia boss in Brooklyn, 29 years old. Tall, controlled, and dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than I made in a year. His dark eyes scanned me slowly, assessing everything about me. I felt my face heat, not just from fear, but from something I didn't want to admit. His reputation terrified me, yet standing this close to him made my heart flip in a way that made no sense. "Is there a problem?" he asked his father, his voice quiet and dangerous. The patriarch smiled at me suddenly, speaking rapidly to Ethan in Sicilian. I understood every word, but I pretended not to. He was saying that I spoke the old village tongue better than most of the young people in Palermo, that I had blood in my voice, that I reminded him of someone. Ethan turned to me, a faint smile touching his mouth. "Miss, my father would like you to join our table." I nearly dropped the entire tray. "I'm working," I whispered, desperate for a way out. "I can't leave my shift." His father laughed so loudly the entire room heard it. Ethan gently took the tray out of my hands and passed it to another server. When his fingers brushed mine, warmth shot up my arm. I hated how my body reacted. This man was dangerous. He could make people vanish. But, for some reason, he handled me gently. "Your supervisor works for the people who work for me," he murmured near my ear. "You're not abandoning your shift. You're following an order." Everyone watched us with suspicion, curiosity, and even hostility. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But the Cavaliers had spoken. That meant I had no choice. The patriarch guided me to a seat beside him at the long table. Ethan took the chair on my other side. I was trapped between the two most powerful men in the room. "Tell me your name, child," the patriarch said. I forced myself to breathe. "Sophie Bennett, sir." His eyes narrowed. "Bennett is not Sicilian, so how do you speak the language of my village?" I swallowed hard. "My grandmother raised me. Her maiden name was Ferraro. She taught me everything." The reaction around the table was instant. Ethan stiffened. The patriarch leaned closer, interest blazing in his eyes. Guests exchanged long, sharp looks. "Ferraro," he repeated slowly. Then he asked if my grandmother was related to Giovanni Ferraro. When I nodded, Ethan's hand tightened around his glass. The old man whispered to his son in Sicilian, words like bloodline, debt, missing daughter. I had no idea why these things mattered, but the look Ethan gave me sent a chill straight through my chest. I had stepped into something much bigger than a catering job, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get out. My pulse thudded in my ears as I sat trapped between Ethan Cavallari and his father. The weight of every stare in the ballroom pressed against my back. I should have felt honored to sit beside a powerful Mafia patriarch, but all I felt was fear curling tight inside my stomach. I didn't belong at this table. I didn't belong anywhere near these people. But the patriarch looked at me like I was a missing puzzle piece he had finally found. "Tell me more about your grandmother," he said. His voice was softer now, gentle even, which somehow made him more intimidating. "And tell me about this name, Ferraro." I took a shaky breath. My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She taught me Sicilian every night at the kitchen table. She said it was important to remember where we came from. I never thought speaking it would bring me here. When I said the name Ferraro again, Ethan shifted beside me. His jaw tightened, his hand rested on the table, and I noticed the faint scar across his knuckles. Everything about him felt sharp, controlled, dangerous. But when he looked at me, something flickered in his eyes. Something I didn't understand. "Ferraro," the patriarch repeated thoughtfully. "Giovanni Ferraro had 3 daughters. One disappeared before the war. The youngest was rumored to have left for America. What was her name?" "Elisabetta," I whispered. "Elisabetta Ferraro. She was my great-grandmother." A wave of recognition swept across the patriarch's face. Ethan leaned in closer, his voice low. "Then you are connected to us more deeply than you know." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know why it made my heart pound harder. I just knew something had shifted around me. The air felt thick with tension, and not just from the guests watching our every move. Before I could ask anything else, a striking woman dripping in diamonds leaned forward from across the table. Her eyes narrowed with open hostility. "How convenient," she said coldly. "A Ferraro descendant appears right when the family discusses expansion in Brooklyn Heights." Her words hit like ice. I opened my mouth to deny everything, but Ethan placed his hand on the small of my back, a quiet, steady warning. "Don't speak. Don't challenge. Not here." "Careful, Aunt Gina," Ethan said calmly. But his calm was the kind that made people nervous. His voice carried a threat beneath every word. "We treat guests with respect, especially those with ties to our family." The woman leaned back slowly, but her glare stayed fixed on me. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. The patriarch asked me gentle questions about my life, my grandmother, my struggles with money. Ethan sat silently beside me, watching everyone with protective sharpness. It didn't make sense. Why would a man like him protect me? Why care who my grandmother was? Hours later, as the party wound down, Ethan stood and touched my arm. "Come with me," he said quietly. "We need to talk." I followed him out to a private garden behind the mansion. The moonlight shone on the hedges and the Manhattan skyline glittered in the distance. It should have been peaceful, but my heart was racing too fast for peace. Ethan turned to face me, hands slipping into the pockets of his black suit. "My father believes your appearance tonight is not a coincidence. He sees signs in everything. But I prefer facts." I crossed my arms, trying to hide my shaking. "What do you believe?" He stepped closer, close enough that I felt his breath warm on my cheek, close enough that I forgot, for one heartbeat, how dangerous he was. "I believe in truth," he said quietly. "That's why I had you investigated tonight." The words slammed into me like cold water. You what? My voice cracked from shock. I needed to know who you are, Sophie. You spoke my father's dialect perfectly. You sat at our family table. That is enough to change alliances. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather folder. Your grandmother was promised to my grandfather's brother, he said. Before the war. Before everything changed. I felt the ground shift under me. He opened the folder, revealing an old photograph. My grandmother is a young woman standing beside a handsome man in uniform. She never told me she was engaged. Never told me she had a life before America. She thought he died in the war, Ethan continued. So she married your great-grandfather instead. I stared at the photograph. At my grandmother's face. The truth twisted inside me. But why does that matter now? I whispered. Because, Ethan said softly, stepping closer again, our families made a promise. A blood oath. One day, the Ferraro and Cavallari lines would unite. His words sent a strange shiver through me. Fear, confusion, and something else I didn't want to name. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the garden. A sleek black car rolled into the driveway. 3 men stepped out, their posture sharp, their movements purposeful. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. The Reezy family, he said, our biggest rivals, and they are not here for the party. A chill ran through me so fast my knees nearly buckled. I should go, I whispered. You can't leave, Ethan said, grabbing my wrist. His grip was firm, not painful. Protective. The Reezys are looking for you. If they learn your Ferraro blood, you become a target. The garden door opened. The patriarch stepped out. They know, he said heavily. Someone told them. They're asking about the Ferraro granddaughter who speaks Old Sicilian. My breath vanished. My grandmother. In an instant, Ethan had his phone out, barking orders. Guards to Brighton Beach. Secure the grandmother. Move her now. Everything became a blur. Fear wrapped tight around my chest. I could barely breathe. The patriarch gripped my hands with surprising warmth. We swore to protect your bloodline, he said. That oath begins tonight. A crash sounded from inside the mansion. A scream followed. Bodyguards surged into motion. Ethan pulled me behind him, shielding me with his body. Your grandmother is safe, he said after checking his phone. She's been moved to our medical facility. No one will touch her. But right now, Sophie, you are not safe at all. The next hours passed in a haze of fear and movement. I barely remembered getting into Ethan's sleek black Audi, or the way the city lights streaked past the windows. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My thoughts kept circling back to one thing. My grandmother was in danger because of me. Ethan drove fast through the empty Brooklyn streets, his jaw clenched, his eyes locked on the road with deadly focus. Every turn he made was sharp and precise, like every second mattered. He did not speak until the car slid into a quiet alley beside a huge warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside. This is one of our safe houses, he said, stepping out and opening my door. No one knows about it except people I trust with my life. Inside, the industrial shell opened into a beautiful modern loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Soft lights glowed across polished wood floors. The contrast made me dizzy. Outside was danger. Inside felt unreal. I dropped onto the sofa, my legs barely holding me up. I don't understand why the Reezy family cares about me. I don't understand any of this. Ethan walked to a hidden panel on the wall and armed a security system that reminded me of a military compound. They care because you are Ferraro blood. And the Ferraro family controlled the shipping routes that made the old world powerful. Those routes still hold value today. The Reezys want control. Your existence threatens their hold. I shook my head. That makes no sense. My grandmother lived in a tiny apartment. We never had money. We never had anything. Ethan sat across from me, loosening his tie, his dark eyes softening in a way I didn't expect. She chose love over power, Sophie. She walked away from the life she was born into. Not everyone understood her choice. Not everyone forgave it. A soft knock broke the silence. An older woman entered carrying a tray of pastries and fresh clothes. Her gentle smile made my throat tighten. "You look just like your grandmother when she was young," the woman said kindly. "I recognized you the moment you walked into that party." My breath caught. "You knew her?" The woman nodded. "My name is Rosa. I grew up with your grandmother in Sicily, and later I worked for Ethan's family. She was like a sister to me." She brushed a strand of hair from my face the same way my grandmother used to. It made tears fill my eyes. After she left, silence filled the loft again. Heavy. Unspoken. Complicated. "Why am I really here, Ethan?" I finally asked. "You could have sent guards. You didn't need to bring me yourself." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying me with a seriousness that sent a shiver through me. "Because I needed to know who you are. Whether you are a threat to my family, or an asset, or something else. Something else." The words hung between us. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. "And if I'm a liability," I whispered, "then I would relocate you and your grandmother to a safe life far from New York," he said without hesitation. "I don't hurt innocent people. Not ever." 3 weeks passed like that. Quiet days visiting my grandmother at the private medical facility where she was safer than any hospital. Long evenings in the loft where Rosa taught me old Sicilian recipes, and Ethan returned each night carrying gelato or flowers for my grandmother. I learned things about him during those nights. He liked chess. He hated disorder. He carried responsibility the same way other men carried weight on their shoulders. And for reasons I didn't dare examine, I felt safe when he was near. One night on the rooftop terrace, he explained more of the tangled history between our ancestors. "Your great-grandfather and my grandfather built their first business together after coming to America," Ethan said as he refilled our wine glasses. "They trusted each other with everything, until the Risi family created a war between them." I stared at the city lights spread beneath us. "So the Risis killed the man my grandmother was supposed to marry?" "Yes," he said, voice heavy. "And that loss fractured both families. The wounds lasted generations." Before I could respond, a security guard burst onto the terrace, out of breath. "We have a situation. Someone hacked the hospital's security system. They know which room the grandmother is in." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might faint. Ethan was already moving, grabbing his phone and firing off commands. "Get the car! We leave now." The ride to the medical facility felt endless. My chest tightened with every block we passed. Thoughts of my grandmother filled my mind. Her soft hands, her warm kitchen, her quiet stories of Sicily. I couldn't lose her, not like this. When we arrived, armed guards surrounded the private wing. Ethan rushed ahead, and I followed in a sprint, my heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. And when I saw her sitting peacefully in bed, working on a crossword puzzle as if nothing had happened, my knees nearly gave out from relief. She looked up with a smile. "Ah, my sweet girl, look at you. You're pale." I let out a weak laugh, sinking into the chair beside her. She had no idea that her life had been moments away from danger. She had no idea what her past had brought into my present. Meanwhile, Ethan studied a tablet with tight frustration in his expression. "There," he said suddenly, freezing the security footage. A familiar man stepped into a restricted area. Carlo Bernardi. His cousin. My heart dropped. I remembered Carlo from several dinners. Charming, polite, friendly to my grandmother. Ethan's voice was ice. He disabled the alarms. He sold her location to the Risis. I felt sick. Hours later, I stood behind one-way glass as Ethan confronted Carlo downstairs in the warehouse. Carlo was sweating, trembling, begging, as Ethan circled him slowly. "You betrayed the family for money?" Ethan asked calmly. "Or did they threaten you?" Carlo's voice cracked. "They just wanted information about the girl. Why she mattered so much to your father." Ethan slid a document across the table. "A DNA test. She's Ferraro blood, Carlo. Not distant, not symbolic, direct." Carlo stared at the document in horror. "And she holds the Ferraro ledger," Ethan added quietly. Your choice nearly got her grandmother killed. The ledger, the old leather-bound book my grandmother gave me, the one I thought was full of recipes and poetry. Now everything made sense. Too much sense. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what that meant. 2 months after the night everything changed, I stood beside Ethan on the Brooklyn docks, staring at the sunrise spreading gold across the water. Cranes moved shipping containers. Workers shouted across the yard. Security guards watched every movement with careful eyes. My world used to be a small diner with sticky tables and a broken soda machine. Now I stood in the middle of an empire I never knew I was connected to. Ethan handed me a leather portfolio filled with official papers, stamped and sealed. My father transferred all Ferraro assets into your name. It's your birthright. What you do with it is up to you. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. Warehouses, shipping routes, licenses, properties, billions in value, all tied to my grandmother's bloodline, all tied to me. The Reezy family won't accept this, I whispered. They have controlled these things for decades. Ethan's shoulder brushed mine lightly. His presence always steadied me, even when it scared me how much comfort I found in him. They won't walk away, he agreed, which is why today matters. Today was the sit-down, the meeting all 5 borough families would attend, a neutral location, strict rules, no weapons, no lies, no second chances. When the time came, Ethan guided me into a restored church in Brooklyn's historic district, now a private restaurant used only for high-level negotiations. 12 men sat at a long table, each representing a piece of New York's underworld. Nico Reezy was at the far end. Cold eyes, sharp smile, dangerous calm. So this is the waitress who speaks Sicilian, he said. I don't see what makes her special. Ethan tensed beside me, but I placed my hand on his arm to stop him. His eyes flicked to mine, surprised, but he stayed silent. I didn't choose this, Mr. Reezy, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I won't apologize for my bloodline, or for wanting to protect my grandmother. Papers slid across the table. Proof of ownership, DNA confirmation, historical documents, everything they needed to see. Nico slammed his fist on the table. This is a power grab, a trick by the Cavallari family. You use a girl with a convenient dialect and a convenient story to take what we have run for 40 years. Guards along the walls moved in unison, hands on weapons. The air grew tighter. Ethan leaned in close enough for me to feel the heat of his breath. Stay calm. Do not show fear. Then something inside me shifted. I didn't want violence. I didn't want bloodshed. I didn't want to be the reason more families got torn apart. So I spoke. I propose partnership, I said. 50-50 management. No more fighting. No more hiding. Both families benefit. Both families rebuild. The room went silent. Even Ethan turned to look at me. Nico stared, suspicious. Why would you share what you claim as yours? Before I could answer, the doors burst open. Armed federal agents stormed the room, FBI. Everyone freeze. Chaos erupted. Nico Reezy was slammed against the table and handcuffed. Agents read charges of racketeering, conspiracy, attempted murder. Ethan stayed perfectly still beside me, his hands visible, his expression unreadable. The other family stepped back to avoid crossfire. We have recordings of your instructions regarding Elisabetta Ferraro, the lead agent said. You're done, Nico. The Reezy empire collapsed in one night. The threat against my family was gone. Everything changed again. 1 year later, I stood in a corner office overlooking the same docks where Ethan first handed me those documents. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling. Ships glided across the harbor. Workers moved with purpose. Ferraro Cavallari Imports was now a legitimate international company. Clean. Respected. Transparent. The old life transformed into something new. My grandmother sat in a comfortable chair by the window, healthier than she had been in years. Sicily next month, she reminded me with bright eyes. You must see our old village. Ethan walked in wearing a charcoal suit that somehow made him look softer and sharper at the same time. He kissed my grandmother's cheek, then set a folder on my desk. "The Tokyo contracts are finalized," he said, "and your grandmother is medically cleared for travel." My heart warmed watching them. He had become her second grandson, her protector, her friend. He moved to stand beside me, looking out over the harbor. "You've changed this place, Sophie. You've changed everything." "Your father changed everything," I said softly. "He gave me a chance." Ethan smiled a little. "My father sees destiny in everything. But I see decisions. And you made the right ones." Behind us, my grandmother slowly stood. "I'll give you two a moment," she said with a knowing smile. "Don't be late for dinner in Little Italy." The door closed, leaving Ethan and me alone. He turned toward me, something nervous flickering in his usually steady gaze. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket, waiting for the right moment. My breath caught. He opened the box. Inside was a platinum ring with a deep green emerald surrounded by diamonds. Vintage. Beautiful. Unique. Not flashy, not cold. It felt like history. "This belonged to my grandmother," Ethan said. "She brought it from Sicily when she came to America. It has never been offered to anyone outside our bloodline." The emerald glowed in the morning sun. My throat tightened. Ethan knelt, this man feared by half of New York, and looked up at me with vulnerability I had never seen in his eyes before. "Sophie Bennett," he said softly, "will you build this new life with me? A life away from darkness, a life built on something real." Tears blurred my vision. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me. He stood and pulled me into his arms as the harbor spread out beneath us, the ships moving in steady rhythm, the skyline glowing bright. From a trembling waitress in a mansion full of danger, to this moment, to him, to a life I never expected but somehow always belonged to.